The morning rush at the downtown Seattle Starbucks was in full swing when Maya Shen first noticed the way her new district manager, Kevin Hartwell, watched her every move with calculating eyes. Steam hissed from the espresso machine as she crafted yet another perfect latte, her movements precise and economical despite the chaos surrounding her. The intricate geometric tattoo that snaked around her left forearm remained hidden beneath her long sleeves, concealing secrets that would have shattered the assumptions of every customer who saw her as just another college dropout serving coffee. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had been working at this particular location for 18 months, quietly transforming what had been the district's worst-performing store into its most efficient operation. Her manager, Sarah Kim, had watched in amazement as customer complaints disappeared. Wait times dropped by 40%, and employee turnover became virtually non-existent under Maya's subtle influence. Maya never sought recognition or promotion. She simply showed up each day at 4:30 in the morning, unlocked the store with movements that spoke of discipline most people never developed, and began the methodical process of preparing for another day of controlled chaos. While other baristas struggled with the morning rush, Maya moved through the cramped space behind the counter like water flowing around obstacles. She anticipated needs before they arose, solved problems before they became crises, and maintained an atmosphere of calm efficiency that made even the most demanding customers pause in their frustration. Her coworkers had learned to trust her judgment completely, often deferring to her quiet suggestions, even though she held no official authority. The geometric tattoo on her forearm was just one of several that decorated her body, each one a memory of something most people couldn't imagine surviving. The interlocking triangles and precise lines looked like abstract art to casual observers, but they told a story of 30 days in hostile territory, of survival against impossible odds, of decisions that had saved lives and haunted dreams. Maya had spent 3 tours overseas as a combat medic with the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment, earning decorations she never discussed and developing skills she hoped never to use again. Kevin Hartwell arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, briefcase in hand and clipboard at the ready, representing corporate efficiency and bottom-line thinking. He was the kind of manager who believed that success could be measured entirely in metrics, that human elements were variables to be controlled rather than assets to be nurtured. His previous assignments had involved restructuring underperforming locations, which usually meant eliminating what he considered dead weight and implementing rigid protocols that left no room for individual initiative. Sarah Kim had tried to prepare Maya for the transition, warning her that Hartwell had a reputation for making sweeping changes without understanding the dynamics that made stores successful. Maya had simply nodded, her expression remaining neutral as she continued cleaning the espresso machine with movements that were somehow too precise, too methodical for someone who had learned their skills in a coffee shop training program. The first confrontation came during the morning rush on Hartwell's 3rd day. Maya was orchestrating the complex dance of drink preparation while simultaneously training a new employee, managing inventory concerns, and maintaining the quality standards that had made their location a customer favorite. She moved between stations with unconscious efficiency, her hands never still, her awareness encompassing every detail of the operation around her. Hartwell appeared behind the counter during the peak rush, his presence immediately disrupting the careful rhythm Maya had established. He positioned himself directly in her line of movement, forcing her to adjust her pattern while trying to maintain service speed. His eyes followed her every motion, taking notes on his clipboard with the focused attention of someone looking for problems rather than solutions. Maya finished a complex order sequence, handed drinks to waiting customers with her characteristic quiet professionalism, then turned to face Hartwell with the kind of respectful attention that somehow managed to convey both compliance and subtle challenge. Her posture was perfect, her expression neutral, but something in her eyes suggested depths that most people never noticed. "Miss Chun," Hartwell began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who enjoyed wielding power over others. "I've been observing your methods, and I have concerns about your adherence to established protocols. Corporate standards exist for reasons, and I'm seeing too much improvisation in your approach." Maya maintained eye contact while processing his words, her mind automatically cataloging the tactical situation. She had dealt with officers like Hartwell before, people who confused authority with leadership and viewed competence as a threat to their control. The morning rush continued around them, other baristas glancing nervously between Maya and their new district manager while trying to maintain service quality. "Sir," Maya replied, her voice carrying the kind of respectful tone that military training had ingrained in her responses to authority figures. "Could you specify which protocols you're concerned about? I want to ensure I understand your expectations clearly." Hartwell's smile was cold and satisfied, the expression of someone who had found the opening he was looking for. He gestured toward the drink preparation area where Maya had been working, his movements theatrical and designed to draw attention from both staff and customers. "Your sequencing methods don't follow the standard operating procedures outlined in the corporate manual. You're taking shortcuts that might save time but compromise our quality assurance standards. Additionally, you're making decisions about inventory and staffing that exceed your authority level." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a poorly maintained espresso machine. Maya felt the familiar sensation of being evaluated by someone who had already reached conclusions, whose questions were designed to justify predetermined decisions rather than gather actual information. She had experienced this dynamic before, in briefing rooms where politics mattered more than mission success, where competence was viewed as insubordination by insecure leadership. Maya glanced around the busy store, noting the way customers continued to receive their orders quickly and correctly, the way her coworkers moved with confidence and efficiency, the way the entire operation functioned smoothly despite the disruption Hartwell's presence was creating. The evidence of success was everywhere, but she understood that evidence rarely mattered when someone had decided to see failure. "I follow all safety and quality protocols, sir," Maya said carefully, her tone remaining respectful despite the growing tension in the situation. "The methods I use are designed to maintain quality while improving efficiency. Our customer satisfaction scores and health inspection ratings support the effectiveness of our current approach." Hartwell's expression darkened at what he interpreted as challenge to his authority. He stepped closer, invading Maya's personal space in a way that would have been threatening if she hadn't spent years in situations where actual threats were measured in bullets and explosives rather than corporate politics. "Ms. Chun, I'm not interested in debate about your methods. What I'm interested in is compliance with established standards. Going forward, you'll follow the procedures exactly as outlined in the corporate manual, without improvisation or personal interpretation. Is that understood?" Maya nodded once, a sharp movement that somehow managed to convey both compliance and barely contained frustration. Around them, the morning rush continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Her coworkers moved with less confidence. Customers sensed the tension, and the efficient machine Maya had helped create began showing signs of strain under the weight of unnecessary conflict. After Hartwell left, Sarah Kim approached Maya with an expression of concern and frustration. She had worked with Maya long enough to recognize the signs of someone processing a tactical situation, the way Maya's eyes tracked movement patterns, and assessed potential problems with an intensity that seemed excessive for a coffee shop environment. "Maya, I'm sorry about that," Sarah said, her voice low enough to avoid being overheard by customers. "Hartwell has a reputation for this kind of thing. He comes in, disrupts successful operations, then takes credit when things eventually stabilize. After he leaves, Maya continued cleaning equipment with movements that were somehow too precise, too controlled. Her hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that spoke of training most people never received, of situations where attention to detail meant the difference between life and death. "It's fine, Sarah," Maya replied, her voice neutral but carrying undercurrents that suggested depths of experience her manager couldn't quite identify. "I've dealt with difficult leadership before. The important thing is maintaining quality for our customers and supporting the team." Sarah studied Maya's face, noting the way her expression remained controlled despite what had obviously been a frustrating encounter. There was something about Maya that had always puzzled her, a quality of alertness and competence that seemed excessive for someone whose resume showed only food service experience since leaving the military. "Maya, can I ask you something?" Sarah said carefully. "Sometimes I get the feeling there's more to your background than what's on your application. The way you handle pressure, the way you assess situations, the way you move through the store. It's like you have training most people don't get." Maya paused in her cleaning routine, her hands still for the first time since the conversation with Hartwell. She looked at Sarah with the kind of direct attention that suggested she was evaluating how much truth the situation could handle. "I served overseas," Maya said finally, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who had learned that most people couldn't process certain realities. 3 tours. Combat medic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "When I came back, I needed something different, something peaceful. Making coffee seemed like a good way to serve people without the complications of military life." Sarah nodded, pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place. Maya's precision, her ability to remain calm under pressure, her unconscious authority with both staff and difficult customers suddenly made more sense. But she also understood that Maya was sharing only the surface of a much deeper story. "The Army trained you well," Sarah observed. Maya smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The Army taught me a lot of things. Most of them aren't relevant to civilian life." That evening, after the store closed and the last customer had departed, with their carefully crafted beverage, Maya remained behind to complete the deep cleaning tasks that ensured morning operations would begin smoothly. She moved through the empty store with the same methodical precision that characterized all her actions, but her mind was processing the tactical implications of Hartwell's arrival. She had seen this pattern before in forward operating bases, where competent non-commissioned officers were replaced by inexperienced officers who confused rank with leadership. The results were always predictable: decreased efficiency, lowered morale, increased mistakes, and ultimately, mission failure. In military contexts, such failures cost lives. In civilian settings, they merely cost jobs and customer satisfaction, but the underlying dynamics remained the same. Maya rolled up her sleeves to clean the espresso machine more thoroughly, revealing the geometric tattoo that decorated her left forearm. The precise lines and interlocking triangles looked like abstract art, but each element represented something specific: 30 days behind enemy lines, a medical evacuation under fire, decisions made in impossible circumstances, teammates saved and lost. The tattoo had been created by a fellow veteran who understood that some experiences needed to be marked permanently, remembered in ways that civilian life couldn't accommodate. Maya rarely displayed it deliberately, keeping her military experience private in a world that either idealized or feared what she represented. Most people were more comfortable with their baristas being uncomplicated, their service providers being simple. As she worked, Maya's mind cataloged the changes she expected to see under Hartwell's management. Increased paperwork that served no operational purpose, rigid adherence to procedures that ignored local conditions and customer preferences, elimination of the small efficiencies and innovations that had made their location successful. Gradual, Degradation of team cohesion as individual initiative was discouraged. The process would be gradual but inevitable, disguised as improvement and justified through metrics that measured compliance rather than results. Maya had watched competent leaders be replaced by political appointees, had seen effective units destroyed by officers who prioritized appearance over substance. The patterns were universal, transcending the differences between military and civilian environments. Maya finished her cleaning routine and prepared to lock up the store, her movements automatic after months of practice. But as she turned off the lights and activated the security system, she wondered how long she would be able to maintain her commitment to quiet service in an environment that was about to become actively hostile to competence. The geometric tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse in the darkness, a reminder of other times when she had faced impossible odds with nothing but skill, determination, and the hope that integrity would somehow be enough to overcome the forces arrayed against it. She had survived 30 days behind enemy lines, had made it through situations that broke stronger people, had earned respect through actions rather than politics. Now she was about to discover whether those same qualities would be enough to survive the corporate battlefield that Kevin Hartwell was preparing to create. The enemy this time wore business suits instead of uniforms, wielded clipboards instead of weapons, but the fundamental conflict remained the same: competence versus politics, substance versus appearance, integrity versus expedience. Maya locked the door and walked into the Seattle night, unaware that her quiet dignity was about to be tested in ways that would reveal the true meaning of service, both military and civilian. The battles ahead would be fought with performance, metrics instead of ammunition, but the stakes remained the same: the protection of those who served with honor against those who served only themselves. The systematic dismantling of everything Maya had built began 3 weeks after Hartwell's arrival, disguised as efficiency improvements and quality assurance measures. Maya watched from behind the espresso machine as her carefully constructed routines were replaced by rigid protocols that ignored the unique challenges of their downtown location. The morning rush, which had flowed like a well-orchestrated symphony under her guidance, began to resemble a traffic jam orchestrated by someone who had never actually driven through the intersection they were attempting to control. Hartwell's first major change involved the drink preparation sequence that Maya had refined over months of observation and adjustment. Her method prioritized grouped preparation of similar drinks, allowing baristas to maintain consistent temperature and timing while minimizing waste and maximizing speed. The corporate manual, however, specified a different approach that looked efficient on paper but ignored the practical realities of peak hour service. "Miss Chun," Hartwell announced during the morning briefing, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who enjoyed demonstrating authority, "I've noticed continued deviation from standard operating procedures. Effective immediately, all drink preparation will follow the exact sequence outlined in Section 4.7 of the Operations Manual." Maya maintained her neutral expression while internally calculating the inevitable results of this change. Wait times would increase by an average of 30% during rush hours. Waste would rise as baristas were forced to prepare drinks individually rather than in coordinated batches. Customer satisfaction would decline as the careful rhythm that had made their location special dissolved into corporate uniformity. "Sir," Maya said carefully, her tone remaining respectful despite her growing concern, "the current method has been producing excellent results. Our speed of service metrics are the best in the district, and customer complaints have dropped to near zero. Would it be possible to continue with the current approach while we evaluate the impact of the changes?" Hartwell's smile was cold and predatory, the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of pushback. He stepped closer to Maya, positioning himself to dominate the small space behind the counter while other employees watched nervously. "Ms. Chun," I'm beginning to see a pattern in your responses to management direction. You seem to believe that your personal preferences supersede corporate policy. That kind of attitude is precisely what prevents organizations from achieving consistent excellence across all locations. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from burned espresso beans. Maya felt the familiar weight of being evaluated by someone who had already reached conclusions, whose questions were designed to justify predetermined actions rather than gather actual information. She had encountered this dynamic in military briefings where political considerations outweighed tactical reality, where competent soldiers were sacrificed to protect incompetent officers. Maya nodded once, a movement that managed to convey both compliance and barely contained frustration. Understood, sir. We'll implement the new procedures immediately. But Hartwell wasn't finished. He consulted his clipboard with theatrical precision, making notes that seemed designed more for show than actual record-keeping. His eyes scanned the busy store, looking for additional problems to identify, more evidence to support the narrative he was constructing. There's another matter we need to address, Hartwell continued, his voice carrying implications that made Maya's coworkers shift uncomfortably. I've been reviewing labor allocation reports, and I'm seeing concerning patterns in scheduling and task assignment. It appears that certain employees are being given responsibilities that exceed their job classifications. Maya understood immediately what he was targeting. Over the past year, she had gradually taken on additional responsibilities that officially belonged to management levels above her position. Sarah Kim had been grateful for the assistance, recognizing that Maya's competence allowed the store to function more efficiently than corporate models predicted. But those same efficiencies now made Maya appear to be exceeding her authority, rather than simply doing what was necessary. The scheduling adjustments were made to optimize coverage during peak hours, Maya explained, her voice remaining steady despite the growing tension in the situation. Sarah approved all changes, and they've resulted in improved customer service and reduced labor costs. Hartwell made another note on his clipboard, his expression suggesting that Maya's explanation only confirmed his suspicions. Ms. Chun, job classifications exist for important reasons. When employees begin operating outside their defined roles, it creates liability issues and undermines management authority. Going forward, you'll restrict your activities to those specifically outlined in your job description. The implications were clear and devastating. Maya would be prohibited from the very activities that had made their location successful. The training she provided to new employees, the inventory management that prevented shortages, the scheduling adjustments that ensured adequate coverage, all would be eliminated in favor of rigid adherence to corporate hierarchy. Around them, the morning rush continued, but the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Customers sensed the tension, employees moved with less confidence, and the efficient machine Maya had helped create began showing signs of strain under the weight of unnecessary bureaucracy. After Hartwell left for his next inspection, Sarah Kim approached Maya with an expression of frustration and helplessness. She had worked in retail management long enough to recognize the signs of a competent employee being systematically targeted by insecure leadership. Maya, I'm sorry, Sarah said, her voice low enough to avoid being overheard. This isn't about performance or procedures. Hartwell feels threatened by competence he can't control. I've seen him do this before at other locations. Maya continued, her work with movements that remained precise despite the chaos surrounding her. Her hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that spoke of training in situations where distraction could be fatal, where maintaining focus under pressure was literally a matter of life and death. It's a familiar pattern, Maya replied, her voice carrying undertones that suggested experience with similar situations. Some leaders view competence as competition rather than an asset. The outcome is usually predictable. Sarah studied Maya's face. noting the way her expression remained controlled despite what was obviously a frustrating situation. There was something about Maya's response that suggested she had dealt with far more serious challenges than corporate politics, that this conflict was merely an annoyance compared to other battles she had fought. "Maya, can I ask what you meant when you said you'd dealt with difficult leadership before? Sometimes I get the feeling your military experience was more significant than you've mentioned." Maya paused in her cleaning routine, her hands still, for a moment as she considered how much truth the situation warranted. She looked at Sarah with the kind of direct attention that suggested she was evaluating the tactical implications of revelation. "I served in combat zones," Maya said finally, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who had learned that most civilians couldn't process certain realities. 3 tours overseas, special operations support. The dynamics of toxic leadership are similar whether you're dealing with corporate politics or military bureaucracy. Sarah nodded, beginning to understand why Maya's responses to pressure seemed so controlled, why her competence appeared effortless, why she moved through challenging situations with confidence that couldn't be taught in civilian training programs. "What did you do in special operations?" Sarah asked carefully. Maya smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Combat medic. I kept people alive in situations where staying alive wasn't statistically probable. It teaches you to focus on what matters and ignore what doesn't." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the afternoon shift. Employees who looked to Maya for guidance, even though she officially held no supervisory authority. They had learned through experience that Maya's judgment was reliable, that her suggestions improved their performance, that following her lead made their jobs easier and more successful. But now those same relationships were being redefined as evidence of insubordination, proof that Maya was exceeding her authority and undermining management hierarchy. Hartwell's campaign was systematic and effective, transforming strengths into liabilities and competence into evidence of misconduct. Over the following weeks, Maya watched as the store's performance began to decline under the weight of Hartwell's improvements. Wait times increased as the new drink preparation procedures proved inadequate for their customer volume. Employee morale dropped as individual initiative was discouraged in favor of mindless compliance. Customer complaints rose as service quality suffered from rigid adherence to procedures that ignored local conditions. Maya maintained her professional demeanor throughout the degradation, following Hartwell's directives precisely while documenting the results in her own private records. She had learned in military service that competence sometimes required patience, that winning required choosing battles carefully, that survival sometimes meant accepting temporary defeats while preparing for ultimate victory. The geometric tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse beneath her sleeve, a reminder of other times when she had faced overwhelming odds with nothing but skill, determination, and the hope that truth would eventually overcome deception. She had survived 30 days behind enemy lines, had kept wounded soldiers alive through impossible circumstances, had earned respect through actions rather than politics. Now she was discovering whether those same qualities would be enough to survive the corporate battlefield that Hartwell was creating around her. The enemy wore business suits instead of combat uniforms, wielded performance metrics instead of weapons, but the fundamental conflict remained unchanged. Integrity versus expedience, competence versus politics, service versus self-interest. Maya prepared for the battles ahead with the same methodical precision that had characterized her military service, unaware that her quiet dignity was about to inspire something unprecedented in corporate retail history. The storm was building around her, but she had weathered worse storms in places where the stakes were measured in lives rather than profit margins. The real test was about to begin, and Maya Chun was ready to discover whether the principles that had sustained her through combat would be enough to survive the corporate war that Kevin Hartwell was preparing to unleash against everything she represented. The rumors began circulating through the downtown Seattle coffee scene, like spilled espresso seeping into white fabric. dark and impossible to remove once they had taken hold. Maya first became aware of the whispered conversations during her Thursday morning shift, catching fragments of discussion between regular customers who had always treated her with respect and appreciation. "Something about safety violations at the Fifth Avenue location," murmured Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher who had been ordering the same vanilla latte for over a year. She spoke in low tones to her companion while glancing nervously toward the counter where Maya was preparing their drinks with her characteristic precision. "I heard there were issues with food handling procedures," replied her friend, Dr. Martinez, whose morning cappuccino had become part of his pre-hospital routine. "Apparently there's an investigation ongoing about systematic protocol violations." Maya's hands never paused in their methodical preparation of the espresso drinks, but her awareness expanded to encompass every conversation happening within the store. Her military training had developed an ability to process multiple information streams simultaneously, to identify threats and assess situations while maintaining focus on immediate tasks. The skill had kept her alive in combat zones where distraction could be fatal. She completed the drink orders and handed them to the customers with her usual professional courtesy, but she noticed the subtle change in their interactions, where once there had been warmth and familiarity, now there was uncertainty and distance. The poison Hartwell was spreading was having its intended effect, transforming relationships built on months of excellent service into suspicion based on manufactured doubt. Chief Barista David Reyes approached Maya during the afternoon lull, his expression troubled and his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. David had worked at the location for 3 years, had witnessed Maya's transformation of their operation, from chaotic inefficiency to smooth excellence, and understood better than most how unfounded any accusations against her competence would be. "Maya, we need to talk," David said quietly, glancing around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard by customers or management. "Hartwell has been asking questions about your work methods, your relationship with staff, whether you've ever cut corners or violated company policies." Maya continued organizing inventory while processing this information, her movements remaining steady despite the implications of David's warning. She had expected this development, had recognized the pattern of systematic character assassination that Hartwell was implementing. The approach was identical to tactics she had observed in military contexts where incompetent officers sought to eliminate threats to their authority. "What kind of questions?" Maya asked, her voice remaining neutral while her mind cataloged potential responses and defensive strategies. David shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling with divided loyalties between protecting Maya and avoiding conflict with management. He wanted to know if you ever bypassed safety protocols to meet rush hour demands, whether you made decisions that should have been escalated to Sarah, if you ever pressured other employees to ignore corporate procedures. The systematic nature of Hartwell's campaign became clearer with each detail David revealed. Hartwell was creating a narrative of negligence and insubordination, gathering statements that could be interpreted as evidence of misconduct, even when the underlying actions had been exemplary. Maya had seen this technique used against competent soldiers whose effectiveness made their superiors uncomfortable. "What did you tell him?" Maya asked, though she already suspected the answer based on David's obvious discomfort. "The truth," David replied firmly, "that you're the most professional barista I've ever worked with, that you've never compromised safety or quality standards, that every suggestion you've made has improved our operation and better served our customers." Maya nodded, appreciating David's honesty while understanding that his truthful responses had probably only intensified Hartwell's determination to remove her. In toxic leadership environments, defending competent subordinates was often interpreted as evidence of conspiracy rather than loyalty. "But he kept pushing," David continued, his voice carrying frustration and confusion, "suggesting that maybe I hadn't noticed things, that perhaps my friendship with you was preventing me from seeing problems objectively. He made it clear that my cooperation with his investigation would be remembered when performance evaluations came around. The implicit threat was classic intimidation technique, designed to isolate Maya by making her supporters afraid to defend her publicly. Maya had witnessed similar tactics used against effective non-commissioned officers who threatened insecure commissioned officers, where loyalty was redefined as insubordination and competence was reframed as dangerous independence. That evening, after the store had closed and the last customer had departed with their carefully crafted beverage, Maya remained behind to complete inventory tasks that had become more complex under Hartwell's new requirements. Every supply order now required detailed justification. Every scheduling decision needed documentation. Every minor adjustment to standard procedures demanded written approval from district management. The geometric tattoo on her left forearm seemed to burn beneath her sleeve as she worked through the bureaucratic maze Hartwell had constructed around her position. The precise lines and interlocking triangles represented memories of a different kind of systematic persecution. 30 days behind enemy lines where survival had depended on adaptability, resourcefulness, and the ability to make life-saving decisions without waiting for authorization from distant commanders. Maya rolled up her sleeves to work more comfortably, revealing the tattoo that had become her private reminder of what real challenges looked like. The design appeared abstract to casual observers, but each element told part of a story that most civilians couldn't imagine surviving. The central triangle represented the medical station she had established in an abandoned building, treating wounded soldiers while under constant threat of discovery. The interlocking circles marked the successful evacuations she had coordinated, moving injured personnel through hostile territory to safety. The smaller geometric patterns filling the spaces between major elements represented individual decisions that had meant the difference between life and death for people who had trusted her. Judgment in impossible circumstances, every line had been earned through actions rather than politics. Every symbol marked achievement measured in lives saved rather than metrics satisfied. As Maya worked through Hartwell's latest requirements, her phone buzzed with a text message from her former squad leader, Master Sergeant Patricia Williams, who had maintained contact with several members of their unit after their return from deployment. Heard through the grapevine that you're dealing with hostile management in civilian life. Remember that some battles are worth fighting and others are worth surviving. Your skills transfer to any environment, but choose your engagements wisely. Semper Fi Doc. Maya smiled at the message, appreciating the reminder that her military family understood the challenges of translating combat leadership experience into civilian contexts. Patricia had been instrumental in Maya's development as a medic, teaching her not just medical techniques, but the tactical awareness that had kept her alive in situations where traditional training proved inadequate. The next morning brought Maya's first formal confrontation with Hartwell's systematic campaign. She was summoned to the small office space behind the main counter, where Hartwell sat with a folder of documents and an expression of satisfied authority. "Miss Chun," Hartwell began, his voice carrying the tone of someone who enjoyed wielding power over others. "I've completed my preliminary review of operations at this location, and I have serious concerns about your adherence to company policies and safety standards." Maya maintained her military bearing, standing at relaxed attention while making direct eye contact with Hartwell. Her posture was perfect, her expression neutral, but something in her presence suggested depths of experience that most civilians never developed. "Sir, I'd welcome the opportunity to review your specific concerns and provide documentation of my compliance with all company requirements," Maya replied, her voice carrying the respectful tone that military training had ingrained in her responses to authority figures. Hartwell opened the folder and consulted documents that Maya suspected contained carefully edited versions of witness statements and selectively interpreted policy violations. His approach was methodical and professional. In appearance, designed to create the impression of thorough investigation while actually serving predetermined conclusions. Multiple staff members have reported concerns about your willingness to circumvent established procedures in favor of unofficial methods that may compromise quality assurance standards, Hartwell announced, his voice carrying false authority designed to intimidate rather than inform. Maya processed this accusation while maintaining her neutral expression, recognizing the classic technique of transforming efficiency improvements into evidence of misconduct. Every innovation she had implemented to better serve customers was being reframed as violation of corporate policy. Every solution she had developed to address local challenges was being characterized as dangerous independence. Sir, I've consistently followed all safety and quality protocols while implementing efficiency improvements that have resulted in measurable performance gains, Maya responded carefully. Our customer satisfaction scores, health inspection ratings, and speed of service metrics all support the effectiveness of our current operational methods. Hartwell's smile was cold and predatory, the expression of someone who had anticipated this response and prepared a counter-argument designed to eliminate any possible defense. He consulted his documents again, making the show of reviewing evidence that Maya suspected was largely fabricated or deliberately misinterpreted. Ms. Chen, I'm not interested in debate about your personal interpretation of company policies. What concerns me is a pattern of behavior that suggests you believe your individual judgment supersedes corporate standards developed by professionals with decades of industry experience. The accusation was designed to be unanswerable, framing any defense Maya might offer as further evidence of insubordination. She had encountered similar rhetorical traps in military briefings, where political considerations outweighed tactical reality, where competent soldiers were sacrificed to protect incompetent officers from the consequences of their own failures. Maya nodded once, a movement that managed to convey both acknowledgement and subtle resistance. I understand your position. Sir, how would you like me to adjust my approach to better align with your expectations? But Hartwell wasn't interested in solutions or improvements. His campaign required escalation rather than resolution, evidence of continued misconduct, rather than corrected behavior. Maya's willingness to adapt was interpreted as admission of guilt rather than professional flexibility. Effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative review pending a comprehensive investigation of your performance and compliance with company standards, Hartwell announced, his voice carrying satisfaction that was impossible to conceal. During this period, you'll be restricted to basic barista duties with no involvement in training, scheduling, or operational decisions. The words hit Maya like physical impact, though her expression remained controlled. Administrative review meant professional isolation, separation from the activities that had made their location successful, and a permanent mark on her employment. Record regardless of the investigation's eventual outcome. Sir, I request the opportunity to present evidence supporting my performance record and compliance with all company requirements, Maya said, her voice remaining steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. Hartwell made a final note in his folder before closing it with theatrical precision. You'll have opportunities to provide input through appropriate channels as the investigation proceeds. Until then, you're to restrict your activities to those specifically outlined in your basic job description. As Maya left the office, she felt the weight of systematic injustice settling around her like smoke from burned espresso beans. She had served with distinction in combat zones, had saved lives under impossible circumstances, had earned respect through actions rather than politics. Now she was being destroyed by lies and bureaucratic manipulation, her competence transformed into evidence of insubordination by someone who viewed excellence as threat rather than asset. But as she returned to the main floor of the store, Maya noticed something that provided unexpected hope. The looks from her coworkers weren't suspicious or judgmental. Instead, they were sympathetic, angry, and supportive. David Reyes nodded respectfully as she passed. Jennifer Walsh, the newest team member Maya had trained, offered a subtle thumbs up. Even customers who had overheard fragments of the conversation seemed to understand that something unfair was happening. Hartwell might have the authority to destroy her career, but he couldn't erase the relationship she had built or the respect she had earned through consistent excellence. The geometric tattoo on her arm seemed to pulse with memories of other times when she had faced impossible odds with nothing but integrity and determination. She had survived 30 days behind enemy lines, had kept wounded soldiers alive through circumstances that broke stronger people, had earned decorations for valor that she never discussed in civilian contexts. Now she was about to discover whether those same qualities would be enough to survive the corporate battlefield that Hartwell was systematically constructing around her. The coffee shop continued its daily operations, but the atmosphere had changed fundamentally. Maya worked within the restricted parameters Hartwell had established while watching the careful efficiency she had built slowly degrade under the weight of bureaucratic micromanagement. Wait times increased, customer satisfaction declined, and employee morale suffered as individual initiative was replaced by rigid compliance with procedures that ignored practical realities. Maya maintained her professional demeanor throughout the systematic destruction of everything she had accomplished, following orders precisely while documenting results that proved the futility of Hartwell's approach. She had learned in military service that sometimes dignity required accepting temporary defeats, while preparing for ultimate victory, that competence sometimes demanded patience in the face of incompetent leadership. The geometric tattoo on her arm served as constant reminder that she had overcome worse challenges in places where the stakes were measured in lives rather than performance metrics. Hartwell's corporate warfare was sophisticated in its manipulation and devastating in its personal impact, but it lacked the existential intensity of actual combat, where survival depended on split-second decisions made under fire. Maya prepared for whatever came next with the same methodical precision that had characterized her military service, unaware that her quiet dignity was about to inspire something unprecedented in retail corporate history. She had weathered storms in places where survival wasn't statistically probable, had maintained integrity under pressure that broke weaker people, had earned respect through service rather than self-promotion. The real test was approaching, and Maya Chung was ready to discover whether the principles that had sustained her through combat would prove sufficient for surviving the corporate war that Kevin Hartwell was preparing to escalate against everything she represented. The enemy wore business suits instead of uniforms, wielded policy manuals instead of weapons, but the fundamental conflict remained unchanged: integrity versus expedience, competence versus politics, service versus self-interest. Maya's quiet strength was about to be tested in ways that would reveal the true meaning of leadership, both military and civilian, and demonstrate that some battles transcend the environments in which they're fought. The morning of Maya's scheduled termination meeting dawned gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that matched the somber atmosphere inside the Fifth Avenue Starbucks location. Maya arrived at her usual 4:30 start time, unlocking the store with movements that remained precise despite the uncertainty clouding her professional future. She had spent the previous evening preparing for this moment, organizing her personal belongings and writing letters she hoped never to send to coworkers who had become like family during her 18 months of service. Kevin Hartwell had scheduled the meeting for 9 o'clock, after the morning rush when the store would be relatively quiet and witnesses would be minimal. Maya understood the tactical reasoning behind this timing, recognizing the same psychological warfare techniques she had observed in military contexts where commanders sought to eliminate problems with minimal disruption to unit cohesion. As Maya prepared the espresso machines and arranged the pastry display with her characteristic attention to detail, she noticed customers beginning to gather outside the store earlier than usual. Regular patrons like Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Martinez stood in small groups, their conversations hushed but their expressions determined. Word had spread through the downtown coffee community about the impending meeting, and something unprecedented was beginning to unfold. David Reyes arrived 30 minutes before his scheduled shift, followed quickly by Jennifer Walsh and the other morning team members. Their faces carried a mixture of frustration and resolve that Maya had seen before in combat units where soldiers prepared to stand together against unjust authority. "Maya," David said quietly as he tied on his apron, "we need you to know that everyone understands what's really happening here. Hartwell's investigation was a sham from the beginning, and we're not going to let him destroy your reputation without a fight." Maya maintained her professional composure while feeling a surge of emotion she hadn't expected. Military service had taught her to rely on unit cohesion during difficult moments, but she had assumed that civilian workplace relationships lacked the intensity necessary for such solidarity. "I appreciate the support," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the significance of the moment, "but I don't want anyone risking their positions for me. Hartwell has made it clear that loyalty to me will be interpreted as insubordination to management." Jennifer Walsh stepped forward, her young face displaying determination that reminded Maya of soldiers preparing for their first combat mission. "Ma'am, with respect, some things are more important than job security. You've taught us what professional excellence looks like, and we're not going to abandon those standards just because management prefers mediocrity." The formal address surprised Maya, though she recognized the unconscious military courtesy that her bearing and competence had inspired in civilian coworkers. Jennifer had never served in uniform, but she had learned to recognize authority earned through action rather than appointment. As the morning rush began, Maya noticed something extraordinary happening throughout the store. Customers who normally grabbed their drinks and departed quickly lingered near the counter, engaging in conversations with staff about store operations and service quality. Business professionals who typically focused on their phones while waiting for orders made direct eye contact with employees and offered words of encouragement about their work. Mrs. Patterson approached the counter during a brief lull in service, her expression carrying the determined authority of someone who had spent decades managing unruly teenagers in public school classrooms. "Maya dear," she said in a voice that carried clearly throughout the store, "I want you to know that everyone in this neighborhood understands exactly what kind of employee you are. Your service has been exemplary, your professionalism has been consistent, and your integrity has been unquestionable." Dr. Martinez nodded agreement from his position near the condiment station. "In my profession, I've learned to recognize competence quickly because lives depend on accurate assessment of skill and character. You possess both qualities in abundance, and any investigation that concludes otherwise is fundamentally flawed in its methodology." Other customers joined the conversation, creating an impromptu testimonial session that transformed the coffee shop into something resembling a town hall meeting. Maya listened to their statements while continuing to prepare drinks, her military training allowing her to process multiple information streams while maintaining focus on immediate tasks. The geometric tattoo on her left forearm seemed to pulse beneath her sleeve as she worked, reminding her of other times when solidarity had emerged unexpectedly in hostile environments. During her deployment behind enemy lines, she had witnessed similar moments when diverse groups united around shared principles, when civilians chose courage over convenience in support of values larger than individual safety. At 8:45, Sarah Kim arrived with an expression of grim determination and a folder containing documents that Maya suspected would prove significant to the morning's confrontation. Sarah had spent the previous week conducting her own investigation into Hartwell's accusations, discovering inconsistencies and fabrications that painted a very different picture of recent events. "Maya, I need to speak with you privately before Hartwell arrives," Sarah said, gesturing toward the small office space behind the counter. Maya followed her manager into the cramped office, Noting the way Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder and spread documents across the desk. The papers included customer satisfaction surveys, health inspection reports, performance metrics, and witness statements that directly contradicted every accusation Hartwell had made. "I've been documenting everything since Hartwell started his campaign against you," Sarah explained, her voice carrying a mixture of anger and professional determination. "The evidence is overwhelming that his accusations are baseless, that his investigation methodology was fundamentally flawed, and that his conclusions contradict objective performance data." Maya reviewed the documents with the systematic attention to detail that military service had ingrained in her analytical processes. Every metric supported her competence, every witness statement confirmed her professionalism, every objective measure validated the improvements she had implemented. "Sarah, this evidence clearly demonstrates the fraudulent nature of Hartwell's investigation," Maya observed, "but corporate politics often prioritize hierarchy over accuracy. Hartwell has the authority to terminate my employment regardless of contradictory evidence." Sarah nodded grimly, understanding the institutional dynamics that protected incompetent managers while sacrificing competent employees. "That's why I've already forwarded copies of everything to district management, regional supervision, and corporate human resources. If Hartwell terminates you this morning, he'll be doing so with full knowledge that his accusations are demonstrably false." At exactly 9 o'clock, Kevin Hartwell entered the store with his characteristic briefcase and clipboard, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone preparing to complete a successful campaign of professional destruction. He surveyed the unusually crowded coffee shop with obvious displeasure, clearly having expected a more private venue for Maya's termination. The customers who had gathered to support Maya maintained their positions throughout the store, creating an audience that Hartwell couldn't ignore or dismiss. Their presence transformed what should have been a simple personnel action into a public referendum on management competence and ethical leadership. "Ms. Chun," Hartwell announced in a voice designed to carry authority throughout the store, "please join me in the office for your scheduled performance review meeting." Maya walked toward the office with the same dignified bearing that had characterized her response to persecution throughout Hartwell's campaign. Her posture remained military straight, her expression remained professionally neutral, but something in her presence suggested depths of experience that commanded respect from everyone who witnessed her passage. The small office felt even more cramped with Hartwell's antagonistic energy filling the space. He arranged his documents with theatrical precision while Maya sat at attention, her hands folded calmly in her lap despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. "Ms. Chen, my investigation has revealed a consistent pattern of insubordination, policy violations, and failure to maintain corporate standards," Hartwell began, his voice carrying false authority designed to intimidate rather than inform. "Your employment with this company is terminated effective immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke from burned espresso beans, carrying implications that extended far beyond Maya's individual circumstances. Hartwell's victory represented the triumph of politics over competence, of expedience over integrity, of fear over excellence. Maya maintained her composure while processing the finality of Hartwell's decision, recognizing that her civilian career was ending just as her military service had concluded, through no fault of her own, but rather because excellence threatened those who preferred mediocrity they could control. "Sir, I request documentation of the specific policy violations and evidence supporting your conclusions," Maya said, her voice remaining steady despite the injustice of the situation. Hartwell's smile was cold and satisfied, the expression of someone who believed he had achieved total victory over a threat to his authority. "That won't be necessary. Security will escort you from the premises immediately. Your final paycheck will be processed according to standard procedures." But as Hartwell spoke, commotion erupted in the main store area. Voices rose in angry protest, chairs scraped against floors, and the unmistakable sound of coordinated action suggested that Maya's supporters were implementing some kind of response to her termination. Sarah Kim burst into the office without knocking, her face flushed with excitement and vindication. "Kevin, we have a problem. I just received a call from Regional Director Amanda Foster. She's en route to this location with a corporate investigation team, and she specifically instructed that no personnel actions be taken until their review is complete." Hartwell's confident expression faltered as he processed this unexpected development. Regional Director Foster had authority that superseded his own, and her personal involvement suggested that his campaign against Maya had attracted attention from corporate levels he hadn't anticipated. "That's impossible," Hartwell protested, his voice losing its authoritative tone as uncertainty crept into his demeanor. "I've been conducting this investigation with full district approval and following established protocols." Sarah handed him a printed email that bore the corporate letterhead and Foster's electronic signature. "Kevin, your protocols are under investigation for systematic irregularities and potential misconduct. Ms. Chun's termination is suspended pending review of your investigation methodology and conclusions." Maya felt a surge of hope mixed with professional vindication, recognizing the pattern of justice finally asserting itself against systematic persecution. Her military experience had taught her that truth eventually emerged when competent investigators applied proper analytical methods to available evidence. The geometric tattoo on her arm seemed to burn with memories of other times when hope had emerged from desperate circumstances, when survival had depended on maintaining faith in principles larger than immediate tactical situations. She had endured 30 days behind enemy lines through similar faith in ultimate justice, trusting that competence and integrity would eventually overcome deception and malice. 40 minutes later, Regional Director Amanda Foster arrived with a team of corporate investigators whose presence immediately transformed the atmosphere throughout the store. Foster was a veteran retail executive whose reputation for protecting competent employees and eliminating toxic management was legendary throughout the company. Maya recognized Foster's type immediately, having served under commanders who possessed similar qualities of authentic leadership earned through experience rather than appointment. Foster's bearing suggested someone who had risen through merit, rather than politics, who understood the difference between authority and leadership. "Mr. Hartwell," Foster announced without preamble, "your investigation of Miss Chun has been suspended pending review of your methodology and conclusions. Preliminary analysis of your documentation reveals significant irregularities that require immediate clarification." Hartwell's face went pale as he realized that his carefully constructed case was unraveling under scrutiny from investigators who applied professional standards rather than political convenience to their analysis. Foster turned to Maya with an expression of respect that had been absent from her interactions with management for months. "Miss Chun, we owe you an apology for the treatment you've received during this investigation. Your performance record with this company has been exemplary, and the accusations against you appear to be without foundation." Maya stood at attention, her military bearing automatic in the presence of competent authority. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate the opportunity to have my record reviewed by qualified investigators." Foster consulted documents that Maya suspected contained the evidence Sarah had forwarded to corporate management, documentation that painted a very different picture of recent events than Hartwell's fabricated narrative. "Ms. Chun, based on our preliminary findings, we're offering you immediate reinstatement with full back pay, promotion to assistant manager, and assignment to our flagship downtown location where your skills can be better utilized and properly protected." The offer represented complete vindication of Maya's competence and integrity, professional advancement that recognized her contributions, and most importantly, protection from future persecution by incompetent management. Maya felt emotion tighten her throat as she processed the magnitude of what was being offered. Military service had taught her to maintain composure under pressure, but civilian vindication carried emotional weight that her combat experience hadn't prepared her to handle. "Ma'am, I accept your offer with gratitude and commitment to continue serving customers and supporting colleagues with the same standards that have guided my performance throughout my employment," Maya replied, her voice carrying military formality that conveyed respect and determination. Foster smiled, recognizing the quality of character that had made Maya a target for Hartwell's persecution. "Ms. Chun, we need more employees who understand that excellence is an asset rather than a threat. Your experience and leadership will be valuable in training other managers and establishing standards throughout our district operations." As Foster spoke, Maya became aware of applause erupting throughout the store. Customers and coworkers who had witnessed her persecution were celebrating her vindication with enthusiasm that transformed the coffee shop into something resembling a victory celebration. David Reyes approached with tears in his eyes and a smile that encompassed months of frustration finally resolved. "Maya, we knew this would happen. Truth always comes out when the right people are paying attention." Jennifer Walsh nodded agreement, her young face glowing with vindication and renewed faith in justice. "Ma'am, you taught us that integrity matters more than convenience. Today proved that lesson was worth learning." Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Martinez joined the celebration, their presence representing the community support that had sustained Maya through her darkest professional moments. Their faith in her character had provided strength when institutional protection failed, demonstrating that excellence recognized excellence regardless of formal authority structures. As the celebration continued around her, Maya rolled up her sleeves and began preparing drinks for the customers who had waited patiently throughout the morning's drama. The geometric tattoo on her left forearm was visible for the first time in months, its precise lines and interlocking triangles catching light that seemed to illuminate memories of other victories won through perseverance rather than politics. Dr. Martinez noticed the tattoo and studied its intricate design with professional curiosity. "Maya, that's beautiful work. The geometric patterns suggest mathematical precision, but there's something deeper in the symbolism." Maya paused in her drink preparation, considering how much of her story the moment warranted. The vindication of her civilian competence seemed to create space for acknowledging her military background in ways that previous circumstances hadn't permitted. "It represents 30 days behind enemy lines," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the careful neutrality she used when discussing combat experience with civilians who had never faced similar challenges. Each element marked something specific that happened during that deployment. The coffee shop grew quiet as customers and coworkers processed this revelation, beginning to understand the depth of experience that Maya had brought to her civilian service. Her precision, her competence under pressure, her ability to maintain dignity during persecution, all suddenly made sense in the context of military training and combat experience. "You were deployed in combat zones?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying new understanding of Maya's qualifications and character. Maya nodded, continuing her work while sharing fragments of a story she rarely discussed in civilian contexts. 3. Tours overseas. Combat medic with special operations support. The tattoo commemorates a mission where we provided medical assistance to isolated personnel in hostile territory. Foster listened to this exchange with growing appreciation for the caliber of employee Hartwell had attempted to destroy. Military veterans with combat experience brought qualities to civilian employment that couldn't be taught in corporate training programs, skills that enhanced any organization fortunate enough to recognize their value. "Ms. Chun, your military background explains much about your performance and leadership qualities," Foster observed. "We should discuss opportunities for you to share that experience with other employees and management personnel who could benefit from your perspective." As the morning progressed and normal business operations resumed, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from combat medic to coffee shop manager, to corporate persecution victim, to vindicated professional. Each transition had tested different aspects of her character, required different applications of her skills, but the fundamental principles remained constant across all environments. The geometric tattoo on her arm served as permanent reminder that integrity survived challenges that destroyed weaker foundations, that competence eventually overcame politics when properly supported, that service to others transcended the specific context in which it was performed. Kevin Hartwell's corporate warfare had been sophisticated in its manipulation and devastating in its personal impact, but it had ultimately failed because it was based on deception rather than truth, on fear rather than competence, on self-interest rather than service to others. Maya's quiet dignity throughout the persecution had inspired something unprecedented in retail corporate history, demonstrating that excellence defended was stronger than excellence attacked, that communities recognized and protected quality when given the opportunity to act on their convictions. 3 months later, Maya stood behind the counter of Starbucks' flagship downtown location, training a new group of baristas who had requested assignment to her store, specifically to learn from her leadership and expertise. The promotion to assistant manager had provided her with authority that matched her competence, protection from future persecution, and opportunity to share the principles that had sustained her through both military and civilian challenges. Her daily routine began at 4:30 each morning with the same methodical precision that had characterized her previous position. But now her efficiency was viewed as leadership rather than threat. Her competence was celebrated rather than feared, and her integrity was protected rather than persecuted. The geometric tattoo on her left forearm remained a private reminder of battles fought in distant places under different circumstances, but its lessons applied equally to corporate environments where character was tested through different means toward identical ends. Maya had learned that excellence was portable across contexts, that integrity was valuable in any environment, and that service to others transcended the specific forms it took. Regional Director Foster had implemented new policies throughout the district based on lessons learned from Hartwell's systematic persecution of competent employees. The Maya Chun protocols, as they became known throughout corporate circles, established clear procedures for investigating misconduct allegations, protecting whistleblowers, and ensuring that excellence was rewarded rather than punished. Kevin Hartwell had been terminated from his position and banned from future employment with the company, his reputation destroyed by the same fabrications he had used to attack Maya. His downfall served as cautionary tale throughout the corporate structure, demonstrating that abusing authority to persecute competent subordinates ultimately resulted in career destruction for toxic managers. But more importantly, dozens of employees throughout the district had been inspired by Maya's example to report misconduct, challenge unethical directives, and maintain their integrity even when circumstances made such choices difficult. The company was becoming an organization where excellence was protected rather than persecuted, where competence was nurtured rather than feared. Maya's story had spread throughout the retail industry as an example of how individual integrity could transform institutional culture, how civilian leadership lessons applied principles identical to military service, how excellence defended became stronger than excellence attacked. As Maya prepared drinks for the morning rush with her characteristic precision and attention to detail, she reflected on the unexpected ways her military experience had prepared her for civilian battles she never anticipated fighting. The enemy had worn business suits instead of uniforms, had wielded policy manuals instead of weapons, but the fundamental conflict had remained unchanged throughout both contexts. The geometric tattoo on her arm caught morning light streaming through the store windows, its precise lines and interlocking triangles serving as permanent reminder that some principles transcended the environments in which they were tested. Maya had survived 30 days behind enemy lines through faith in values larger than immediate tactical situations, had maintained integrity under pressure that broke weaker people, had earned respect through service rather than self-promotion. Now she was discovering that those same qualities were equally valuable in civilian contexts where different enemies threatened different objectives through remarkably similar methods. Excellence remained excellent regardless of where it was. Practiced, integrity remained valuable whether tested by bullets or bureaucracy, and service to others remained the highest calling whether performed in combat zones or coffee shops. The morning rush continued around Maya with the smooth efficiency that had become her trademark. Customers and coworkers moving through carefully choreographed routines that maximized quality while minimizing stress. Maya's leadership had created an environment where competence was celebrated, where individual initiative was encouraged, where excellence was the standard rather than the exception. As the sun climbed higher over downtown Seattle, Maya Chun prepared for another day of civilian service, guided by principles learned in military contexts, sustained by integrity tested in hostile environments, and strengthened by the knowledge that truth eventually overcame deception when competent people chose courage over convenience. The geometric tattoo on her arm pulsed with memories of other battles won through perseverance rather than politics, reminding her that the most important victories were often the quietest ones, achieved not through superior firepower, but through superior character, measured not in territory gained, but in principles maintained. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.